Hello, I'm Soraya Mia, and you're watching AWANI Global. Now I'm here at the 37th Asia Pacific Roundtable with Dr. Thitinan Pongsudhirak, the Senior Fellow, Institute of Security and International Studies, ISIS Thailand. And we are going to be talking about the role of ASEAN in mitigating conflicts, current conflicts, as well as geopolitical conflicts. Now, the situation in Myanmar continues to trouble ASEAN, along with other geopolitical conflicts such as the US-China conflict, as well as the disputed South China Sea issue, etc., etc. Now, ASEAN is becoming increasingly disunited. Now, Dr. Thitinan, would you perhaps be able to talk about the role of Thailand in ASEAN 2025 on its potential to act as a regional mediator?
ASEAN has come a long way since 1967. This year is 57, next year 58, 2025. And along the way, ASEAN has had ups and downs. But, I think initially, remember that ASEAN as we know it has existed as a 10-member organization since only 1999. So more than half of its life, it was not 10 countries. So, in the 1990s, it had new members. But originally, it was 5 countries. Thailand being the birthplace, co-founder, and then Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Singapore. Brunei came in 1984, and then Vietnam 1995, Myanmar and Laos in 1997, Cambodia in 1999. So we have to understand that ASEAN, as a 10-member states, is still only 25 years ago, not 57. Now, if you look back as a mediator, I see ASEAN as it formed the organization to maintain autonomy from the great powers. So to understand ASEAN, you have to look at the different stages of its growth and evolution. Initially formed during the Cold War, a lot of intra-regional conflicts between Indonesia, Malaysia, in fact, konfrontasi. And then Thailand played a mediating role. That mediating role led to the formation of ASEAN in 1967. And then the Cold War, first 2 decades, ASEAN was divided. Indochina was not part of ASEAN. Brunei came in 1984 only. So, when there's a crisis and conflict, Cold War, ASEAN was divided. After the Cold War, ASEAN became one Southeast Asia, all 10 countries in the 1990s. So to me, that was really the high point. In the 1990s, ASEAN formed the APEC in 1989, ASEAN Free Trade Area in 1992, ASEAN Regional Forum in 1994, the ASEAN Plus 3 in 1997, 1998, Chiang Mai Multilateral Initiative in 1998, and then going to the 2000s. That was really the high point of ASEAN, leading to the East Asia Summit, 2005. And then remember the ASEAN Charter, 2008. The ASEAN Charter has had 3 pillars, the political security, economic community, socio-cultural. And then ASEAN built on that, on the ADMM, ASEAN Defense Ministers meetings, and then plus, ADMM plus. That was about the high point. At that time, ASEAN was not just a mediator, it was a leader in the region, in Asia, not just Southeast Asia. It became what I call kind of a broker, a bridge, and a buffer among the great powers. And it had a convening authority. People came for these meetings, and ASEAN was in the driver's seat of regional architecture building. And then roughly early 2010s, maybe 2012, when ASEAN for the first time couldn't produce a joint statement, and it got stuck on the South China Sea, the role of China. So since then, roughly 2012 onwards, we've seen more tension, more confrontation, and now some conflict. And this has been very divisive, as you mentioned, for ASEAN, disunited. And ASEAN is in some areas in somewhat of a disarray even. And now, when you are divided like this, as ASEAN it's difficult to play a mediator role. We heard this morning at the 37th Asia Pacific Roundtable, the speech, lecture by the ASEAN Secretary General, Dr. Kao Kim Hoon. he referred to the great power rivalry and conflict, and he said ASEAN has to navigate, so use the word navigate, not mediate, not even mitigate, not resolve, but navigate. So what's happening here is that when the great powers have conflict, it is a big challenge, is an existential, daunting challenge for ASEAN. When the major powers, so in my view, they have to be in relative balance and at relative peace for ASEAN to flourish. When the great powers are in conflict, like we're seeing now, we used to see the US and the Soviet Union conflict, Cold War, ASEAN divided. Now we're seeing the US and China, new Cold War or geopolitical, geostrategic competition and conflict, ASEAN divided. ASEAN divided for those more in favor, supportive of China, and others who are more critical, opposed to China. And we can see there's even the division between the mainland countries, more supportive of China, maritime countries more opposed, South China Sea being the arena of conflict and confrontation. But we also see ASEAN divisions on other issues, on Myanmar, on even Russia-Ukraine. On Russia-Ukraine, Singapore has imposed sanctions on Russia, the Russian aggression, but Vietnam and Laos have abstained from the major UN votes against Russia. On Hamas-Israel, very strong feelings here in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and also strong feelings around the region, but I think it's very much pronounced here in Malaysia and Indonesia. We have a significant Muslim population in Thailand, Muslim population in Philippines, but even beyond the Muslim sentiments in Southeast Asia, Indonesia being the largest Muslim country, even beyond the Muslim sentiments, even the general sentiments in like Thailand, Buddhist country, Cambodia, Laos, and so on, also kind of a little bit critical of what Israel is doing. I mean, Israel, I think, had a right to self-defense, but I think that right was exercised past the point of global sympathy and support. So a lot of divisions in ASEAN on Myanmar, Russia-Ukraine, Hamas-Israel, and I think it's underpinned by this great power conflict again, like we saw in the earlier Cold War.
Yep. As you rightly explained about the disunity within ASEAN, how do we actually navigate through all of these conflicts? Let's just talk about, locally, when we talk within ASEAN nations, the crisis in Myanmar, the ongoing crisis in Myanmar. How do we actually sort of navigate through to help end the ongoing crisis there?
The Myanmar crisis comes from the civil war, but it also originated from the coup, the military coup on February 1st, 2021. This is an issue, very dear to my heart. I did some teaching in Myanmar. I have many Myanmar friends, former students. And the country had a whole decade of promise and potential. So that 5 decades of dictatorship from 1962 roughly to 2011. And then they had a kind of a compromise, power sharing between civilian leadership under Aung San Suu Kyi and military leadership under General Thein Sein. And that compromise allowed for Myanmar to reopen. It was a remarkable, exuberant period of political opening, economic reform, and development progress. If you were back in Myanmar in the 2010s, you saw companies setting up shop, embassies opening, investments pouring in. The country, has a lot of history, so it's a great country to visit. That's when I went to teach there, and did some capacity training. I used to go there 3-4 times a year, and very dear to my heart. But now, this is an issue not just for Myanmar, but also for Thailand and for the region. When you have an election, the losers must accept the result for the country to move on. This happens in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in the Philippines. When you have an election, there's a winner. The winner has to take office and implement policies, and the losers have to allow them. In Myanmar, in Thailand, we've seen this already for 2 decades. Every time you have an election in Thailand, the winning party never stays in office long enough because they get overthrown in military coup or judicial intervention. In Myanmar, the military, on February 1st, 2021, after losing the election, big landslide, again in November 2020, like 2015, the military took over. And the takeover was like if you can imagine a room that was kind of brightening with lights. Suddenly it got unplugged. The military took off the plug, and it became a dark dictatorship. Now, what's different about this coup is that the people didn't go along with it. Myanmar changed forever during the 1 decade of opening. A lot of young people, they thought their forebears, their parents and grandparents put up with dictatorship, but they tasted 1 decade of reform of technology, of expectations, of possibilities, of jobs, of education, traveling abroad, and so on. So they opposed the coup. So within few months, they had a civilian kind of a civil disobedience movement. But within 3 months, 6 months, the military response was to kill people, to kill their own people, a lot of young people. So the young people organized themselves into the People's Defense Force, taking up arms, small arms initially, whatever arms they can get their hands on, and fighting back against the military. And this movement, this PDF, spread, proliferated around the country. And then it joined forces with the ethnic armies, with the NUG now, the National Unity Government, and now it's winning the war. Myanmar now, the military is losing. So what's happening moving forward is that ASEAN has a role to play. Thailand has a role to play because it has a long 2,400 kilometers border, but also China, Bangladesh, a little bit of Laos. Moving forward, ASEAN is a conundrum because ASEAN cannot be respected internationally if it cannot do more to promote dialogue and peace and stability in Myanmar. Myanmar is bleeding ASEAN because it's not like any other crisis. You can have a crisis in Thailand coup or something, but in Myanmar, every hour, every day, as we talk now, someone could be dying, could be shot. It's very violent, very harrowing. So ASEAN had a 5-point consensus back in April 2021. Hasn't made much progress, but it's still the main document because the coup leader, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, he signed on to this document. He signed on to this consensus. So I think now Thailand has a new government under Srettha Thavisin. He wants Thailand to play a bigger role, a more consequential role. With Laos as chair, Malaysia as chair next year, I think will be a crucial year. And Malaysia now, to me, has a very outward-looking, bold and principled foreign policy projection. Yesterday, the foreign minister gave a dinner speech. He talked about values. So I think in 2025, it could be a pivotal year for the region, for Malaysia and for Myanmar. If Malaysia can play the leadership role as an ASEAN chair, together with Thailand and in conjunction, cooperation with Indonesia, the ASEAN Secretariat, and then try to find a way to broker some kind of a dialogue. I think the resistance coalition, they're ready. They're actually winning on the ground. They're winning more battlefields. The borderlands now not controlled by the military. It's the military that needs to be brought into this dialogue. But and then we have General Prabowo coming into leadership in Indonesia, new government Indonesia, new government Thailand, Malaysia as chair. I think next year could be a pivotal year to broker some kind of a dialogue and compromise in Myanmar.
Speaking about dialogue, especially with the Myanmar junta, we've been stuck on this 5-point consensus. How do we move forward? Is there something new, like as Malaysia will chair ASEAN next year? Are we going to stick to this 5-point consensus? Or are we going to come up with something new? Because we've been stuck for quite a while in resolving this Myanmar crisis. What's your thoughts on this?
The 5-point consensus is still significant because it's a consensus among all 10 leaders of the member states. It's the only agreement that the coup leader, Min Aung Hlaing, signed on to, but he never abided by it. So I think it's still significant, but now I think there has to be other efforts. Thailand is providing some humanitarian assistance. I think ASEAN is playing a role in that. But I think there has to be some back channels of diplomacy. On the resistance side, I mean, the ethnic armed organizations, their leaders have to be engaged, and there are many of them, so we have to kind of identify and kind of form a kind of a coalition to talk with the ethnic armies. But then also, these include the Kachins, the Shans, the Karens, the Chins, and even the Rakhine, the Mons, the Karenni. So these ethnic leaders have to be brought in, incorporated, inclusive. But then on the military side, they're losing. And I think there's a lot of pressure on Min Aung Hlaing. This is where the things will turn. Have to find back channels to deal with the SAC beyond Min Aung Hlaing. And then, I think the back channels can start now. It takes a lot to bring the different stakeholders to the table. Myanmar will not be the same country that we knew back in the 2010s. It can still be a viable country, but there will be a very different configuration. Some states, the Myanmar states within Myanmar, may become more autonomous. There could be a federal structure, but it would have to be loosely structured because the states like Rakhine State, Shan State, Kayin State, they want more autonomy. So the relationship between the central government and the states, the constituent states, the ethnic states, would have to be recalibrated, rethought. But I think the key will be the back channels to prepare, on the one hand, the resistance coalition, who should be at the table, and to do it as soon as, now, get the conversation going. And then on the military side, I think that the Tatmadaw, the military, still has a role to play eventually after Min Aung Hlaing, after the SAC. But then within the coup leadership, within the high command, there has to be some back channels to reach out to the top generals that will play game, that will play ball, that will engage. This is a tricky part, the trickiest part. And then, they have a lot of animosity, hatred, mutual hatred between the resistance and the military. That's another barrier. But it takes some deft diplomacy next year and the year after under Philippines. I think these next couple of years, especially next year, I think with the Malaysian foreign policy posture, projection, and principle, I think there can be some headway in Myanmar, because by that time, by next year, the military will probably have lost most of the territory.
That's right. Now back to the divisiveness within ASEAN, right? Some has criticized the role of Thailand in actually having dialogue with Myanmar, as compared to other ASEAN nations who have been bringing Myanmar out of the discussion table. What are your thoughts on this?
I've been a critic of the previous Thai government, not the newly elected Thai government under Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin. The previous government derived from the military coup in 2014. So it was an autocratic military-backed government, 5 years military government, 2014 to 2019. 2019 to 2023, after the election, still had the same military leader as Prime Minister, General Prayut. And that regime, being autocratic, being like-minded with the SAC, the Myanmar military, they kowtow, they supported, sympathized with the military government in Myanmar, organizing track 2 dialogues, all kinds of dialogues for the junta. But now with the new government, it's very different, qualitatively, fundamentally, not doing that anymore. So that's finished. Okay. Now they're trying to make up for what happened in the past by engaging. The previous Foreign Minister, Ban Pri, made a lot of headway, visiting and gaining trust. Trust building is the key with the resistance. So we eroded a lot of trust with the previous Prayut government. But the new government, I think that they're playing a different ball game. I think they want to be the mediator, and they also want help from ASEAN, from Malaysia, Indonesia, engaging with NUG now, Thailand. And so I think now you're not going to see that kind of support for the military junta anymore under this new government. What they can do beyond that is a trick, not just providing humanitarian assistance and engaging the resistance, but have to find access to the military leadership, the ones that can be pragmatic, that can be a partner beyond Min Aung Hlaing and beyond the SAC.
Right. Now, you've mentioned earlier 57 years of ASEAN, and of course things have been many very respected, but older voices are there. probably the new generation would like to hear more young voices to, deal with young issues, like you mentioned earlier in Myanmar. There are many younger movement, youth movements. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on that? How could ASEAN engage more with the youth?
The youth is the way forward for ASEAN. I think that the older ASEAN, nationalities, they know ASEAN more. I think that the challenge now is to promote ASEAN-ness among the young and younger demographics. But the technologies and the tools to do so are much more convenient, much more available than before. I think that young people in ASEAN have different kind of aspirations. If you look at young people, for example, like the Milk Tea Alliance that we saw earlier, they tend to be a little bit more open. They want an open society a bit. I don't think young people generally like closed societies and autocratic governments because it doesn't conduce, it doesn't, gel or support their way of life. I mean, young people want freedom because they want to buy things, they want to travel, they want to do this and that. My students, I've been teaching for 30 years. So I think that it has to be cultivated. ASEAN-ness among the young should be cultivated. There are already some programs among the ASEAN youth, but I think this has to be more broad-based and deepened. And if it's done right with the help of technology and toolkits, there's still, I think, the medium-term, longer-term future for ASEAN-ness and ASEAN identity, because young people of ASEAN, if they can be mobilized, galvanized, encouraged and cultivated to think in a certain way, in a certain mindset, with a certain common interest, that could be the future ASEAN.
We have about just 2 minutes left. Perhaps you could just briefly elaborate on how ASEAN can achieve more, not just ASEAN-ness among the youth, but also more ASEAN unity among the ASEAN states, member states.
Yeah, back to the initial question about the ASEAN divisions and disunity. I think that we're facing a new era of geopolitical tensions and geoeconomic war now. So, when the great powers are in conflict,
it's hard to
like
achieve.
we saw in the Cold War, ASEAN unity is more difficult to come by. Mm-hmm. But there could be limited or tailored unity and community. It doesn't have to be always 10 member states. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's not 10 anyway. It's 9, minus Myanmar, out indefinitely. So I think, in my view, a lot of issues ASEAN can still get done with the 5 original members as the core. And then on certain issues, could be Vietnam. On some issues, could be the rest of ASEAN. But it could be a variable mix, a variable geometry, a variable kind of ASEAN cohesion. It doesn't always have to be the whole of ASEAN, the ASEAN 9 or the ASEAN 10. If you can think of ASEAN that way, a more flexible, tailored ASEAN 5 plus X, then I think that's the way ahead for ASEAN.
That's an interesting point. But we do hope for ASEAN's voice to be more unified and more strong on the global front, no matter if it's 9 or 5 plus. But that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Dr. Thitinan Pongsudhirak from ISIS Thailand. I'm Soraya Mia, and we'll see you again.